What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some of Jalen Hurts' throwing mechanics, okay? So we're going to be talking about how you guys can get more velocity on your throws. We're going to be breaking down his full motion. We're going to be talking about throwing on the run, and then we're going to be talking about a great move that you guys can practice and use in a game to be able to extend the play and improve your extend play ability, okay, guys? It's going to be a great video. It's going to bring a lot of value to a lot of quarterbacks. Also, guys, if you're a quarterback and you want to get better at reading coverages, right? You want to know what beats certain defenses, how to recognize those defenses, and how you guys can structure your own playbook to beat that defense. Check out that very first link in the description. It says learn how to read defenses. It's 200 already made breakdowns based on reading coverages, reading defenses, how to attack those defenses, plus 4 new videos every single week. And then depending on what plan you decide to get, you'll get access to some advanced drills. You'll be able to set up Zoom calls with me as well. So check out that very first link in the description, guys, if you want to get better at reading defenses. Let's get started. So first things first, going to be looking at this throw here. This is just from him at camp or at practice. So let's watch him take. He's just going to be taking this 3-step drop, 1 hitch, and just drive this thing. So now let's talk about, we're going to mainly be talking about his hip drive, foot strike, all that good stuff, right? So we're going to be looking at him here. So you see when he's able to get that front foot down, I think the most important thing is like the timing of that foot strike is a little bit different for everybody, right? Some people have a quicker one. Some people have maybe a little bit longer of a one. His is kind of right in the middle, if you ask me. I think his is just, it's not too quick. It's not too long. Nothing really affects that motion. But the major key is that when that front foot gets down, you guys want to be somewhat loaded and have that front shoulder closed and have a little bit of weight on this back leg, right? Because to be able to get your hips to drive through, we talk about that a lot if you're familiar with this page. We talk a lot about hips, your hips being able to rotate through, producing ground force and producing torque. But the only way that you're able to get your hips to fully rotate through is by transferring that weight to your front leg, right? So the most important thing is being able to drive off of this back leg. You see how he's kind of doing that little weight shift. He's pushing off, it looks like that inside arch of his back foot, and he's bringing his knee through, right? So the whole goal of that is to obviously get the weight to his front leg, which allows his front hip to open up to where you can get his hips parallel to the target, and that's what brings that football through, and that makes you throw with a lot less effort, right? If you're a guy who maybe, I don't know, has arm problems, has elbow problems, shoulder problems, and you feel like every time you throw, you're putting so much strain on your elbow and your shoulder, it's probably because you're not really throwing as much with your hips and you're not generating enough power with your lower body, right? The whole goal is to be able to generate power here and with your shoulders, which creates torque, but also shoulders kind of ties into accuracy and release point, and have that ball come through effortlessly, right? These guys, NFL quarterbacks, cannot throw for as much as they do if they are throwing with their arm, right? You see a lot of them throw the ball, they all throw the ball differently, but they have some key similarities that they all do. Hip drive, shoulders staying square, having their weight transferred, those are all major keys that they have, right? And that's what we're trying to focus on here. We're not saying that there's one way to throw a football, but there's some key things that every quarterback should have when it comes to throwing a football. So that weight transfer, which allows that front hip to come through. If he stays with that weight on that back leg and he never really fully shifts here, it's going to be like his hips are going to lock out, and he's not going to be able to open up his front hip because, again, like I said, you want to get your hips parallel to the target, because when you're in a square position, and by square I mean that like you could draw a square with your body. Your shoulders are level, hips are level, and you just connect it and you're in this square position. That's that clean release point that we're trying to search for every single time. And you see how his knees coming through. He's not swinging this leg way outside of his frame. I think the main mistake a lot of quarterbacks make as well is when they're here, they don't really shift the weight going this way. They're not going at the target. Like when they push off that back leg, they're pushing up, or they're trying to push way around, and they swing this leg way out here, and then this leg will lock out, or their front stride takes them way outside their frame, and they don't rotate at all with their hips. They rotate with their shoulders, but your shoulders play zero factor in this, right? You want to be able to keep your shoulder back on foot strike, so when your hips snap through, you have that separation, and you almost pull that front hand. You see how he almost pulls that front hand back to his chest here? That's what gives you that snap to the motion. That's what gives you that torque and gets you into this like C curve right here, right? Where this ball is trailing his hip is coming through before the football. That's how we can create a lot of power on this throw. Now, when you transfer that weight, like I was saying, you see how he's able to keep a slight bend on that front knee. That allows you to keep that ground, because when you shift that weight from that back leg to that front leg, you're producing ground force, right? You're using your legs to push this throw, and you turn that into rotational force. But when you have that front leg lock out, maybe you strike the ground heel toe, maybe you pop this thing up and your butt pops up, I lose that ground force and I lose that energy that I'm trying to drive towards the target, right? So it's about shifting that weight, which allows your hips to rotate through. You almost want to bring your back hip to your belly button, but we can't do that if I'm not shifting that weight to my front leg. And then on foot strike, your shoulders want to be going back, okay? So that's, in a nutshell, what you should be focused on when it comes to basic throwing mechanics. I think those are the key points here. Front foot down as your shoulders back. Let your hips bring your shoulders through. The only way your hips come through is when your front foot has that weight transfer from that back leg to it. And Jalen Hurts does a great job of doing that, which is why he's got a lot of velocity on this throw, right? So let's watch this thing again, full speed one more time. See the thing shoot off his hand. That's what we got to be able to try to accomplish when I want to throw with more velocity, when I want to get more power on my throws mechanically, right? Obviously, there's some things that tie into it like core strength, hip mobility, being able to drive those hips, being able to be loose at your hips, leg strength. There's a lot of different things that tie into it, but that mechanically, that's what we should be looking for, okay? So now we're going to be talking about throwing on the run here, and every quarterback breakdown we do, we try to do this where we look at a throw from the pocket or look at a normal throw, and then we look at a throw on the run, and then maybe a little bit more of a creative throw where they got to buy a little bit of time. So on the run, I think the major key is that when this front foot gets down, we want to have my shoulders somewhat loaded. You know what I mean? So like if I'm here and I get this front foot down and my arms are spread at 90, like my front side's coming open, like this front shoulder's open, and your hips are getting towards, because when you step with this leg right here, this right leg, that's bringing your hips towards the target. That's no different than when you step with the front leg on a normal throw and you're driving your hips towards the target. Now, when you have your hips going towards the target and maybe you open up your front shoulder and you're spread at this 90-90, like when you're like 90 degrees here, 90 degrees here, and you're open as you're stepping with the right leg, you got no torque on the ball, right? The torque comes from snapping your hips through and keeping your shoulders loaded, right? So when you step with the front leg, that brings your hips, and if you keep that front shoulder closed on that foot strike, that gives you that snap through when you bring this left leg through, because that left leg through is like that snap. But if you swing this front side out of there, you swing this elbow way out, you maybe bring it this way, or maybe you swing it down. If you swing it down, that's going to affect your release point. Your release point's going to get pushed up high because, again, your body's on a midline, and even on the run, we still want to be able to rotate, right? The whole goal is to be able to rotate through this throw. The whole goal is to be a rotational athlete, because that's what gets us the most power, gets us the most torque, and gets us the most velocity on this throw, but also it makes us more accurate. You see how he leaves this hand right by his face. Now, this one, he's kind of changing up the way he throws this ball. He's throwing this thing with a little bit of touch, so what does he do? Lets that wrist flick go a little bit higher. When you're able to stay disciplined with your shoulders, disciplined with your hips, you keep your hips at the target. That also helps with accuracy, and that left leg kicking through is what helps with that, and we'll get to that in a second. But when you're able to stay disciplined with your shoulders, you're not swinging your elbow way down, you're not opening way up to where your hips end up over there. Your release point is consistent. Wherever you release that ball, wherever you're emphasizing on flicking that wrist, that's where we're going to go with that ball. That's where I'm going to be a little bit more accurate, right? So now, you also want to be able to try to keep your hips level to the target on release point. We get to that square position, right? You're able to draw a square. You see shoulders, hips, everything's drawn into a square. But that comes with where you're kicking that left leg through. I see a lot of quarterbacks, and this is a common mistake, they'll step in the direction of the throw with the throwing side leg, because that's where we want to step, but this left leg will swing towards the sideline. Then their hips go towards the sideline, and they're kind of fighting the motion. They end up throwing across your body. That's where everybody gets that term like, oh, it's an across body throw. So all that comes from is kicking this leg through. The analogy I use for my quarterbacks is like, pretend like there's sand on the top of your foot, and you're trying to kick sand at somebody. If you've ever been to a beach where you kick sand at somebody, that's how you want to think of it, like you're kicking water at somebody. You want to do that with the tip of your toe, because that will bring your hips level, and you see how he's in a square position at release point. That's how we can be more accurate. That's how I can get more accuracy on the run. Let's watch the thing again, full speed one more time. Great job having those shoulder closed on foot strike and having that hand finished by our face so we could be more accurate on the run. Change up the arm angle or the release point on this to have a little bit more touch. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at this move here that you can work in a practice setting. Now, this is a very, very uncomfortable throw, but believe it or not, if you're a quarterback, you've ever worked with me, you know that we work this type of throw all the time, and like this exact situation, which is why I wanted to include this as well. But it's a conflict climb. So you see how this guy's coming at the top shoulder, and we step through, right? So a great way to protect this ball is not by sliding through, it's by stepping through, and then he's taking 2 steps. He goes 1, 2, out of there. And it's out of his hands at 2 steps. Now, this is a very, very uncomfortable throw, right? Super uncomfortable throw. He's getting it out in 2 steps, not ready for it, can't prepare to be on the run. But this is something that we can practice, fellas, and this is something that you can prepare for, because it's putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations. Now, the analogy that I use is that you think guys like this, right, like, and maybe he has, and the only reason I say you can practice this is because I've practiced it before personally, and then I've used it with my guys over and over and over again, drilled it into their heads. But the thing that we talk about every single time is that you really think like a guy like Patrick Mahomes, every single throw that he makes, he's practiced that? No. There's no way to prepare for every single throw that you come across, right? It's such an unpredictable position. It's like the only thing that you can compare it to is like the ocean. The ocean is one of the most unpredictable things in the world. Very similar to the quarterback position, right? You never know what's going to be thrown at you. You never know the exact situation. You can kind of prepare for it. You can kind of script it a little bit, but you never know the exact situation. But what you can do when you're training, especially if you don't have live receivers, with live receivers, it's even better. But especially if you're just throwing by yourself, throwing to a net, throwing to your dad, brother, whoever, or just a stationary target, like you're at a training session, just stationary, putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions is what makes you better, right? And so this is a very uncomfortable position. So something that you could work on is like when you have a quarterback, maybe you have a quarterback coach give you a command, like maybe a climb call, and you work on a conflict climb, and then maybe you throw a dig off of 2 steps. You just go 1, 2, and it's out. And you work on that correct sequence like we were talking about, stepping with this, having your front shoulder closed. When you kick that leg through, you're kicking it at the target so you can stay square. Your hand stays tight to your frame so it's a consistent release point. It's all about putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations because this is one of the most uncomfortable positions in all of sports, right? So being able to have those situations where you're not ready to make this throw, but you have to make this throw. So you got to trust your mechanics. You got to trust that, okay, I'm going to rotate my shoulders back. I'm going to step with my right leg. I get that dissociation. And I'm putting myself in those awkward spots. That's how you get better as a quarterback when you're in the offseason. That's how you get better as a quarterback when you're working routes versus air. You know, you're against air. That's not realistic to a game. So let's actually put myself in realistic spots. There's a great interview with Aaron Rodgers where he talks about how he works out and he'll be throwing routes with his guys and he'll bring his eyes there at the last possible second because that's uncomfortable for him. So when you actually are comfortable, it's easy. And when you're put in uncomfortable spots, it's not a foreign language, right? So it's all about putting yourself in these types of throws right here so we could extend the play and we have that extend play ability. Because if you're a quarterback in today's game and you don't have that extend play ability where you can buy a little bit extra time, make these off-platform throws, make these uncomfortable throws, you're not going to be successful, right? So let's watch this thing again full speed one more time. Great job stepping through, protecting the ball, taking 2 steps, getting this thing out, getting it to his playmaker, right? The whole goal is to get it to those playmakers, get it to the guys who are a lot more athletic than we are, and let them go play, right? All right, guys, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, please leave those in the comments. Again, if you want to get better reading coverages, check out that link in the description, guys. I promise you it's almost like a Netflix for quarterbacks where you can just watch 200 plus videos on just all coverage breakdowns, all how to read defenses, how to beat defenses. Check out that link in the description, and I'll see you guys next time.